Tuesday morning, 9:47 a.m., New York City Civil Court. Before I even called the session to order, my bailiff leaned in close. Your Honor, heads up on the defendant. She's been giving court staff a hard time since she walked in. Condescending. Demanded we push her case back because she had a phone call to finish. I sat on this bench long enough to know exactly what walks through that door carrying that kind of energy. The docket read, Victoria Ashford, age 52, traffic citation, running a red light with aggravating circumstances. The officer's notes flagged that a pedestrian had nearly been struck. When asked for her license, she refused, informing the officer that her attorney manages these matters. Victoria Ashford entered my courtroom the way some people enter a room they already own. The Valentino suit was immaculate. Diamond earrings, a Hermes bag swinging from her wrist like a trophy. But what filled the room wasn't the money. It was the dismissal, the way she moved through. The space without acknowledging a single person in it. The way her phone held more of her attention than the proceedings she'd been summoned to attend. Miss Ashford, I kept my voice even. Good morning. Please approach. She moved toward the bench slowly, thumb still working across her screen, didn't look up, didn't respond to the greeting. The gallery, packed with people waiting on their own cases, already sensed something was off. An older woman in the third row whispered something to the person beside her. Miss Ashford, I said again, firmer now, I need your complete attention. Please put the phone away. She finally glanced up. The expression on her face made clear that compliance was a favor she was extending, not a rule she was following. It's Miss Ashford, not Mrs. I didn't marry for a title, Your Honor. I built my own. She tucked the phone away with a slowness designed to make a point. The gesture said, I'll do this, but on my terms, not yours. I want to be clear about something. Over the years, I've seen every personality type walk through that door. Arrogance I have no patience for. Miss Ashford, you're here on a traffic citation, running a red light on Benefit Street. How do you plead? She shifted her weight, one hand resting on her hip. I'm currently managing a $12 million commercial deal. Is there any way to move this along? I have things that actually matter waiting on me. The word actually dropped into the courtroom like a stone into still water. She had just told an open courtroom, including the judge, that this proceeding wasn't worth her time. The gallery reacted quietly, head shaking. A man in a work uniform crossed his arms, jaw tightening. Miss Ashford, this courtroom handles matters of public safety and the rule of law. These proceedings do matter. She scoffed, not subtly. Your Honor, do you have any idea how many people I employ? The tax revenue my company brings into the city. I've revitalized entire neighborhoods. This ticket is beneath me. She said it without embarrassment. In her world, contribution to the economy entitled you to exemptions from the law. The air in that room had changed. I picked up the file and began reviewing it carefully while Victoria checked her watch. Everyone saw it. The law applies equally to everyone. Your business achievements don't alter that. She met my eyes directly for the first time. Her gaze was flat. With respect, Your Honor, in the world I operate in, everything has a cost. I've paid fines before, dozens of them. Just tell me the number and my assistant will take care of it. She had just reduced a court of law to a payment terminal, reduced me to the person behind the counter. She had no idea what she had just triggered. Before we discuss fines, let's go through the specifics of this violation, I said, setting the file down carefully. The citation places you at Benefit Street and Hope at 3:15 p.m. Does that sound correct? She waved her hand. If that's what the report says, then fine. I don't catalog every intersection I pass through. My mind is occupied with larger concerns than traffic signals. The officer's report also indicates that when stopped, you declined to produce your license. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. I asked why I was being pulled over. That's my right, isn't it? Or does that only apply to people who actually contribute something? The implication wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. You absolutely have the right to ask why you were stopped, but according to Officer Ramirez's written report, you stated that you don't carry your license because your attorney handles all traffic matters, and that he was wasting his time on someone of your standing. She didn't deny it. I may have said something to that effect. I was already running late to a meeting that had been scheduled for weeks. The officer seemed more focused on asserting himself than on actual public safety. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman with a file stack under her arm, stood. Your Honor, may I approach? I nodded. She handed me a set of documents and addressed the court. Miss Ashford's driving record reflects 6 prior violations over 3 years. All were paid remotely. She has never appeared in court for any of them. Additionally, this particular violation carries aggravating circumstances that weren't captured in the initial citation. I studied the pages. Miss Ashford, these prior violations include 2 speeding citations, 3 red light infractions, and 1 reckless driving charge. That is a substantial and consistent pattern. Her voice rose slightly. A pattern of what? Living my life, getting to where I need to be. Every single one of those was paid on time. That's how this works, isn't it? You issue the fine, I pay it, and we both move on. That's the transaction. No, Miss Ashford, that is not how this works. Each of those violations was a moment in which you put yourself and others at risk. These aren't receipts. They are warnings you chose not to take seriously. She actually laughed, a short, dry sound. Warnings. I've been driving for 35 years without a single accident. These tickets are nothing more than municipal revenue, and we both know it. The prosecutor continued. Your Honor, regarding the aggravating circumstances, the camera footage confirms that Miss Ashford ran the red light inside a designated school zone. The time was 3:15 p.m., which corresponds to dismissal at the elementary school on that block. A pedestrian, an elderly man, was forced to lurch backward onto the curb to avoid being struck by her vehicle. The gallery broke into murmured reactions. I raised my hand for silence. Miss Ashford, you ran a red light through a school zone during dismissal. Time, her jaw tightened. That school zone is only in force for 30 minutes twice a day and creates unnecessary gridlock. And if that man was in the crosswalk when my light was red, that means he was jaywalking. Why isn't he being cited? The gasp spoke louder this time. A mother near the aisle hugged her toddler tighter, staring at Victoria with open disbelief. I've heard a lot in this courtroom. That sentence was something else entirely. That man was inside a designated crosswalk with the right-of-way. You ran the light and came within inches of striking him. Do you understand the gravity of what nearly happened? What nearly happened didn't happen. I had full control of my vehicle. The issue is that pedestrians aren't paying attention. They wander into the road expecting everyone else to stop for their carelessness. I shouldn't be penalized for someone else's poor judgment. Miss Ashford, you ran the red light. You violated the law. That pedestrian did nothing wrong. Her posture shifted. Her voice turned clipped, transactional. Your Honor, I'll be direct. This entire proceeding is a waste of everyone's time, yours, mine, and everyone sitting in this room. I run a $40 million company. Every hour I spend here is an hour pulled away from decisions that affect hundreds of families. I ran a red light. I'll pay the fine. Can we please process this and let me get back to work that actually matters? The silence that followed was total. Even the court reporter's fingers went still. Victoria Ashford had just told a room full of people, including me, that her schedule outweighed their safety, their time, and their presence. But she wasn't finished. She looked directly at me, and what came out of her mouth next is something I will carry with me for as long as I serve, with all due respect, Your Honor, and I do mean that sincerely. I'm not interested in being lectured by someone who has never built a single thing. I create jobs. I develop properties. I generate real wealth for real people. What exactly do you do? You sit in that chair every day, process paperwork, and draw a government salary. You've probably only ever signed the back of a check, never the front. The courtroom didn't erupt, it froze. The bailiff moved forward half a step before catching himself. The court reporter's mouth fell open. Someone in the gallery gasped so sharply it echoed off the walls. A man in a veteran's cap rose to his feet, his face flushed. Another person whispered, she did not just say that, but she had. Victoria Ashford had just told a sitting judge in open court that her decades of public service amounted to nothing. Whatever warmth I had extended to this woman evaporated completely. When I spoke, I did not raise my voice. I didn't need to. It carried to every corner of that room without effort. Miss Ashford, each word placed with precision. Did you just inform this court that its service to the law is without value? She didn't retreat. I'm saying we operate in different realities, Your Honor. In mine, results and productivity are what matter. I can't afford to lose a morning sitting in a courtroom over something that should take 5 minutes. This isn't personal. It's simply how things work. I stood. When I stand during an active hearing, everyone who knows this courtroom understands something significant is about to happen. The gallery went completely silent. Even Victoria seemed to register that the temperature in the room had changed. Miss Ashford, my voice was ice. You have just demonstrated the most profound disrespect for this institution that I have witnessed in all my years on this bench. Before Victoria could respond, a voice rose from the gallery. Your Honor, may I say something? An elderly man, somewhere in his mid-70s, wearing a faded veteran's cap, stood with the careful dignity of someone who had earned every ache in his body. I gestured for him to continue. His voice carried a slight tremor, not weakness, but controlled fury. Your Honor, I've sat here and listened to this woman disrespect you in your own courtroom, and I won't stay quiet. I've been here before, parking issues, nothing major. Every time I was heard, every time I was treated fairly, I was treated like a person. He turned slightly to face Victoria directly. Ma'am, you don't understand what you're talking about. This judge has probably done more for ordinary people in this city than your company ever will. She doesn't measure her worth in dollars. She measures it in fairness, in making sure people like me aren't crushed by a system we barely understand. The fact that you think a bank account makes you better than her tells everyone in this room exactly who you are. The applause was fierce, immediate. Several people rose. A woman near the back called out, "Thank you for saying that." I raised my hand and the room quieted, but the energy had irreversibly shifted. Victoria glanced toward the exit. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "Miss Ashford, I am going to offer you one opportunity. Retract your statement and apologize to this court." Her pride went to war with her instincts. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she made her second catastrophic mistake. "Why would I apologize for stating the truth?" "You want respect? Earn it. Sitting in judgment of people who actually accomplish things doesn't earn it. What do you make?" $80,000 a year. 9万美元. I spend that on a long weekend. We are not the same. The courtroom erupted again. This time I didn't move to quiet it. I let the wave of collective disapproval wash over her. I let her absorb exactly what this community thought of her words. When I finally raised my hand, the expression on my face had moved past anger entirely into something colder, more purposeful. "Miss Ashford, you have just made a decision that will define the remainder of this hearing. We are going to examine your case with the full attention it deserves. Bailiff, please ensure Miss Ashford remains in this courtroom." I turned to the expanded file the prosecutor had placed before me, and Victoria Ashford, for what may have been the first time in years, understood that her money might not be enough. I put on my reading glasses and reviewed the documents page by page, deliberately. "Bailiff, please bring up the traffic camera footage on the monitor." The screen flickered on. The gallery watched a silver Mercedes pass through a red light without decelerating. Timestamp 3:15 p.m. location, Benefit Street at Hope, directly in front of Varish and Gregorian Elementary School. The footage ran in real time. Vehicles sitting stopped at the red, children visible on the sidewalk. Backpacks bouncing. A crossing guard in a bright yellow safety vest. Stop sign raised. The light clearly and fully red. Victoria's Mercedes didn't slow. It barreled through. An elderly man halfway through the crosswalk yanked himself backwards so forcefully he nearly lost his footing. The crossing guard sprinted forward, catching his arm with one hand while throwing the other out to stop two children who had started stepping off the curb behind him. My voice was measured but hard as stone. "Miss Ashford, that crossing guard is Rebecca Martinez. She has worked that post for 12 years. The elderly man you nearly struck is Thomas Wu, a retired postal worker. The two children Mrs. Martinez pulled back. One is her 8-year-old daughter. The other is her nephew, who has cerebral palsy and cannot move quickly. Had Mrs. Martinez reacted half a second later, had Mr. Midas would been one step further into the intersection, we would be having this conversation in a very different kind of courtroom." Today, Victoria's face had drained of color. She held on. "Your Honor, I couldn't see them clearly from that distance. The sun was in my eyes. I made a split-second judgment call. I rewound the footage and played it again in slow motion. Miss Ashford, the light had been red for 3 full seconds before your vehicle entered that intersection. Mrs. Martinez's vest is engineered to be visible from hundreds of feet away. The children were plainly present. And according to the speed data pulled from the camera, you were traveling at 52 miles per hour in a posted 25 miles per hour school zone." The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, with permission, Mrs. Martinez is here today. She came directly from her shift this morning." I nodded. A woman in her early 40s rose from the gallery in her crossing guard uniform. She approached the witness stand with quiet composure, was sworn in, and sat with her hands folded in her lap. "Mrs. Martinez," my voice softened, "please tell the court what happened that afternoon." She took a breath. "Your Honor, I've worked that crossing for 12 years. I know that intersection better than most. People know their own driveways. That day, dismissal time, I had my sign up. Mr. Wu was crossing like he does 3 days a week. He walks his granddaughter home from school. He was clearly in the crosswalk. The light had been red for several seconds." Her voice steadied as she continued. "I saw that Mercedes coming. Something told me it wasn't stopping. I've been doing this long enough to read traffic, to feel when a driver isn't paying attention. But this wasn't a distracted driver. This was a driver who registered the light and chose not to care." She paused. "Mr. Wu was in the middle of the crosswalk when I understood the car wasn't going to stop. I screamed at him to move. He tried, but he has severe arthritis in both knees. He can't move quickly. The car missed him by inches. Inches, Your Honor." Another pause. Her eyes were glistening. "My daughter and my nephew were right. Behind him, Miguel has cerebral palsy. He cannot react fast. If I hadn't grabbed them both and pulled them back, if Mr. O'Parting Wu had taken one more step, if any single thing had been different in that moment," her voice broke, "I would have watched children die in front of me." The courtroom was silent except for someone crying softly near the back row. I gave the room a moment. "Thank you, Mrs. Martinez. Your testimony is fully noted." I turned to Victoria. "Miss Ashford, you've heard Mrs. Martinez's account. Do you have anything to say?" Victoria's voice was tight, controlled. "I'm sorry she was frightened, but nothing actually happened. Everyone walked away. We're being asked to treat an ear miss as a catastrophe." I ran a red light. That's the violation. Everything else is speculation. My expression darkened. Miss Ashford, you stood in this courtroom and told me that you contribute to this city, that you create opportunity, that the law should accommodate you accordingly. Let's examine that claim. The prosecutor stepped forward with another folder. Your Honor, when Miss Ashford referenced her company, I pulled publicly available records. The findings are relevant to this court's assessment of character and judgment. I opened the folder. My eyebrows rose. Miss Ashford, your company, Ashford Properties, is currently named in 7 active civil lawsuits. 3 involve former employees alleging wage theft and hazardous working conditions. 4 come from tenants citing uninhabitable units, no heat, severe water damage, pest infestations. Is this accurate? Victoria's composure finally fractured. Those are frivolous claims from disgruntled workers and tenants looking for settlements. My legal team is handling them. They have nothing to do with a traffic violation. I closed the folder slowly. Miss Ashford, you stood here and told this court that you are a contributor to society, that you matter more than the rules that govern everyone else. These documents describe something quite different. They describe a pattern of exploiting the people who work for you and the people who live in your buildings. They describe someone who believes wealth is a permanent exemption from accountability. I turned the page. The city. Building inspector has issued 17 violations across your properties in the past 18 months. 17, including 3 red tag orders for immediate hazards. One of your apartment buildings had non-functioning smoke detectors in 12 separate units. Another had exposed electrical wiring. You weren't simply negligent, Miss Ashford. You were dangerous, and yet you came into this room to lecture me about contribution. Victoria's hands were visibly unsteady against the podium. Those violations were corrected. We addressed everything as soon as it was flagged. My voice rose fully and deliberately for the first time in the entire proceeding. After how long, Miss Ashford? After how many families lived under those conditions? After how many documented complaints were dismissed? You have every resource available to maintain those properties safely, and you chose margin over the people inside them, just as you chose your schedule over the safety of children in that crosswalk. The prosecutor added, Your Honor, Miss Ashford's license also reflects 2 prior suspensions, 1 for accumulated points, 1 for failure to appear at a prior hearing. Both were eventually cleared through legal representation. Victoria's voice went sharp. My attorney manages these things because I don't have time to sit in courtrooms every week. That is precisely what legal representation is for. I stood. Attorneys represent you, Miss Ashford. They do not replace your accountability. You seem to operate under the belief that wealth is a permanent shield, that your financial standing insulates you from the rules that apply to everyone else, that your time is worth more than the lives of children or the dignity of your employees or the safety of the people living in your buildings. Today in this courtroom, you are going to learn otherwise. I held the gavel but did not strike it yet. Miss Ashford, the base fine for running a red light in a school zone is $500. Given the aggravating circumstances, your speed of 52 in a posted 25 miles per hour zone, the near collision with pedestrians including minor children, and your complete and unambiguous absence of remorse, I am elevating that fine to the statutory maximum. 2500. Victoria's eyes went wide. 2500 for a red light. That is completely disproportionate. I'm not finished, Miss Ashford. My voice cut cleanly through her protest. Your license is suspended for 6 months, effective immediately. During that suspension, you will complete 80 hours of community service at a children's hospital in person, where you will witness firsthand what happens. 2 children who are not as fortunate as the ones Miss Martinez protected that afternoon. You will also complete a mandatory 40-hour defensive driving course in a classroom with other drivers, learning what should have been internalized long ago. Additionally, for your contempt toward this court, for your direct insult to the judicial process, and for your sustained and deliberate disregard for the dignity of these proceedings, I am holding you in contempt that carries an additional $1,000. Your total today, Miss Ashford, is $3,500 plus $450 in court costs, bringing your total obligation to $30950. I let the numbers settle. Victoria's voice cracked. You cannot suspend my license. My entire operation depends on me being mobile. How am I supposed to function? The same way the majority of people in this city function every single day, Miss Ashford. Public transit, ride share. You might even consider walking occasionally through the neighborhoods you claim to have transformed. Your company will not collapse, and perhaps while you are not behind the wheel, the roads surrounding those school zones will be marginally safer. I'll appeal. This is excessive. This isn't justice. It's punitive. I leaned forward, my eyes steady on hers. Justice is exactly what this is. Justice is what happens when someone finally says no to you, when someone finally enforces a standard you spent years buying your way around. You entered this Courtroom this morning convinced that your wealth made you different. You're leaving it with a clear understanding that in the eyes of the law you are not. You are a citizen who endangered lives and showed contempt for the system that exists to protect us all. Nothing more, nothing less. You ask me what I do, Miss Ashford. I'll tell. You. For a few hours every day in this room, your net worth means nothing. Your properties mean nothing. Your self-assessed importance means nothing. Here, you are simply someone who must answer for her choices. That is what I do, and I do it because if I don't, if this institution doesn't, then those children at that crosswalk have. No protection from people who think the rules don't apply to them. The gavel fell. The sound rang through the silence. Victoria stood motionless. Her face moved through shock, indignation, and something slower, something that might eventually become understanding. The bailiff approached. Miss Ashford, your license is to be surrendered. To the clerk before you leave this building, you are not permitted to operate a motor vehicle for 6 months beginning today. Violation of this order will result in criminal charges. As she turned to go, her heels sharp against the floor, I added one final statement. Miss Ashford, I hope you use these 6 months deliberately. I hope. You sit with families at that hospital and look clearly at what you nearly caused. I hope you ride the subway and sit next to the people whose lives have never once crossed your mind. And I hope that when you return to this courtroom to present proof of your completed service and your driving course, you arrive as someone different. Then the woman who walked in here today, she didn't respond. She moved toward the exit, carrying whatever remained of her composure, which wasn't much. The gallery watched her go. When the door closed behind her, the room filled with applause. Unplanned, unanimous. This time I didn't stop it. I simply nodded to Miss Martinez, who pressed her fingers beneath her eyes, and to Mr. Wu, who raised a weathered hand toward me in quiet salute. Some people walk into this courtroom believing that wealth rewrites the rules. Victoria Ashford walked out understanding otherwise. That is what accountability looks like. That is what justice is for. And as long as I sit on this bench, it will not be for sale at any price.